enseignante et chercheur, et elle se partage entre Hambourg et la Chine. Elle a également enseigné pendant de nombreuses années à l'université de Stockholm, en Suède, et c'est toujours toute sa carrière, toute sa vie, toute sa formation est consacrée à l'histoire de l'art chinois en général, et puis en particulier elle a 2 domaines de prédilection qui sont la calligraphie chinoise, l'histoire de la calligraphie, l'histoire des traités, enfin tout ce qui concerne la calligraphie de près et de loin en Chine. Ouais. Et puis alors aussi un grand volet dont elle s'occupe depuis fort longtemps, qui est celui qui nous concerne ce semestre, celui de la peinture chinoise. Et alors nous nous connaissons depuis de nombreuses années, et je sais que maintenant, je ne sais pas si elle nous le dira, mais Uta travaille depuis très très longtemps à une recherche approfondie et à la préparation d'un ouvrage majeur que nous appelons entre nous, elle, moi et nos collègues, on appelle ça le Big Banana Book de BBB, hein, le Big Banana Book de Uta. C'est-à-dire qu'elle a accumulé tellement de connaissances, de recherches, de travail, d'iconographie, enfin tout ce que vous voulez, qu'un jour, effectivement, sous l'aile d'ailleurs d'un de ses professeurs chinois qui a participé à sa formation lorsqu'elle était encore doctorante et autres à Hangzhou, qui lui a fait un autre BBB, qui est le Big Bamboo Book, en langue chinoise, où on n'a jamais dépassé cette quantité de recherche et de travail sur le sujet bambou, ce qui est absolument magnifique aussi. Mais, alors, Uta, elle, c'est le bananier. Et donc, nous sommes plusieurs à la solliciter, à la pousser, à l'encourager, pour qu'enfin elle accepte de mettre ça sous la forme donc d'un livre qui sera en anglais. Il est entièrement rédigé en anglais, et puis après probablement traduit en chinois, sur ce thème qu'elle va nous exposer et aborder là, dans quelques instants, qui est vraiment un des plus beaux thèmes et sujets et ambiances comme ça qui enveloppe et accompagne l'histoire de l'art chinois, l'histoire de la peinture chinoise, comme vous allez voir, depuis si longtemps, avec cette fameuse plante un peu magique, un peu spéciale, un peu tellement poétique. Et alors, on est très impatients. Vos camarades continuent à arriver au compte-gouttes, mais je vais quand même lui passer la parole à Uta, et puis je vous demande de bien vouloir l'accueillir dans nos murs aujourd'hui, avec une salve d'applaudissements préalables. Alors maintenant, je vais lui passer la parole. Une dernière chose, Uta parle aussi le français bien, mais elle est modeste et elle m'a dit, je préfère faire mon exposé en anglais, parce que vous connaissez tous et vous comprenez tous l'anglais. Alors, je lui passe la parole.
Merci beaucoup. So, excuse me, and well, first I would like to thank Inalco for the honor for the first time to come here and be honored to give a lecture here, and above all, for the person who made my stay here possible, André Kneib. So I would like to offer him a very warm thank you from all of us too. So, let's start. My apologies if I speak in English. I try to speak slowly and clearly because my academic French isn't quite up to that subject level. So, you may wonder why I have chosen such a seemingly odd and strange subject matter to invest with so much research. The answer lies many years back. There was a conference call in Stockholm at the Museum of Far Eastern Antiquities, Scholars from all over the world were invited to give presentations. There was only one requirement. We could choose any subject we liked for our lectures, but it should be based on an object in that museum. At that time, I had never been to Stockholm, let alone this beautiful museum of Far Eastern antiquities. And as a principal research idea, I'm not very happy to say anything about a painting or a piece of calligraphy which I have never seen. So I prefer to look at the real thing first, and then I can say something about it, not just prints in books or something like that. So start from the real facts and the proper material. And as I had never been to Stockholm before, I thought, well, to sidestep my personal research problem, I will simply say something about iconography. For that matter, I don't have to really look at the original painting. And I chose this painting here by Assuré with the title Banana, Rock, Plum and Bamboo, which is a hanging scroll at the Museum of Far Eastern Antiquities in Stockholm. And I thought that's easy, it's like bamboo or plum blossoms or something. I just look up some standard encyclopedia or some bigger books, and then I'll find the material, what is the symbolism, the iconography of the banana plant. I looked at many, many books, no answer. And then I realized, oh, this is a big research topic that nobody has ever done anything about. Well, until fairly recently, I must say, some younger Chinese scholars have taken up certain specific aspects of the banana plant, but in the sense of a comprehensive research, that hasn't happened yet. So today I would like to give you a short, not short, maybe an hour or so, survey of the various aspects, iconographic aspects of the banana plant in Chinese art. Because unlike, for example, the bamboo or the plum blossom, it never, until today, it never received a fixed symbolic meaning. So if somebody comes up with a microphone and says, please answer, what is the symbolic meaning of the banana plant in Chinese art? I, at least, cannot answer in just one sentence, because it's so multifaceted. But that's the interesting thing about the research on the banana plant, because it is so varied and subtle, like the banana plant itself. You know, it's hollow, it's not a tree, it belongs to the group of grasses, and it grows layers and layers of new leaves. And that is just the same that is true about the actual iconography. And what that implies is that artists who did use the banana plant as a motif in painting or on ceramics, in lacquer carving, in silk embroidery, whatever, were free to choose from the broad repertoire of meanings to invest their own artwork with their personal choice of meaning. And our job will be to decipher what exactly they had in mind when they created, for example, a painting like this one by Xue on the screen. So that's the big idea behind it. So how do you start with a big topic like that? Of course, one first turns to texts as well to understand the Chinese old ideas about what is the banana plant, what is it used for, what are perhaps philosophical or religious connotations, cultural connotations related to the banana plant. So going back in history, first to establish the terminology. In Chinese, banana is either jiao or ba jiao. And I first checked some standard non-fictional texts, like the famous Shuwenjiezi, and in there is actually a definition of what is the banana plant, and it's simply described as a raw plant fiber, so very simple. And then we have a book called the Sanfu Huangtu from the 3rd century Common Era, and that already has an interesting story relating to North-South issues. It is said that there was a historical event in the year 111 before Common Era. Emperor Wu Di ordered the people in the south, well, actually in all of China, to contribute specimens of plants to the central court. And there he would plant them in their garden. This is a sort of microcosm in the macrocosm idea behind it, exerting his imperial power over the whole country. And part of establishing his power is through actions like this, requesting all the domains in the country to send 2 specimens of local plants to the central court, which he would try to plant in his imperial garden for reproduction. But the 12 banana plants he had been sent from the south, they all died, of course, because they're not made for the northern climate. But that's an interesting story. Then in Yang Fu's Yi Wu Zhi, Record of Strange Things, 2nd century Common Era, this is a book about just the southern region, the Guangdong area, and there you also, of course, find a definition and some remarks on the banana plant. Also, of course, to expected locally in the Guangzhouji is a mention of the banana plant, and you can read further mentions here on the screen. But what is more interesting than these simple definitions of what is a banana plant, how is it used, is this mention here in a philosophical text in the Liezi. In chapter 3 on King Mu of Zhou, in section 6, there is a story that you might perhaps have read or even had the difficult task to translate in some exam on classical Chinese, the story about a woodcutter who comes home from work and suddenly he finds a dead deer. So that's a nice Sunday meal, he thinks, but a whole big deer is far too heavy to take home and have it chopped up and make a nice barbecue. So, but he didn't want to lose about the deer, so in the text it said he cut some big banana leaves and covered the deer so nobody else would get his deer. And then he went home and told his wife, no, on the way home, he sort of was talking to himself and said, is that really possible? That did I see this in a dream, or was that for real, that I stumbled across a whole deer would be my Sunday dinner? And then he went home, and then somebody overheard him saying that. And then he ran to the spot and took the deer home to his place. And when the poor woodcutter returned, the deer was gone. But he had a dream which told him who had stolen his deer and taken it home. And then the two quarreled, who's the rightful owner of this deer, and then finally they took it to court, and the judgment was very philosophical about since you saw it in your dream, it's not real, and this Taoist twist of the story. Anyway, the main point is about the banana leaf. And from that philosophical text, from the Liezi, we have now this binomial, this philosophical term, lu meng, which is not to be taken literally, dreaming of the deer, but it encompasses these ideas between reality and dreams. Are we just making up things, or is reality really happening around us? So, and that's in this term here, lu meng. We will see this later in works of art, where this is simply quoted, expecting people to know this story. Actually, when I read later commentaries and very early editions of the Liezi, this term, using banana leaves, is not in the original text. It's just some big-leafed grass, but it's not specifically jiao or ba jiao. It's later commentaries that thought about this. Well, a deer is big, so you need a big leaf to cover it with. And what is that? that's the banana plant.
Yeah.
So they made it up in later commentaries. It's not actually in the original text. So that's an interesting development here. So the second group of texts that I looked at, what I'm trying to do here is to make clear my methodological approach to this subject matter, in the hope that perhaps you can use this principal research approach for other topics that might interest you. So that's the idea behind this talk. So the second group of texts I looked at was, of course, poetry, and it became obvious that from fairly early on, already in the 4th century, poets and female poets, both male and female, wrote poetry with the banana plant either as their principal subject matter or somewhere mentioned in the poem. And you can read all those big names here on the screen. I mean, they're all extremely, well, most of them are extremely well-known poets. So things started, the banana plant as a cultural topos started to enter the high cultural sphere of poetics and literature as early as the late 4th, early 5th century. That can be summed up from that. And if you actually read these poems, I was trying to filter out what kind of motifs or ideas these poets associated with the banana plant. And I made you a little list here. Very obviously, the banana plant is related to notions of the South. There is, of course, a red-green symbolism, green for the body of the plant and red for its flower. It's also very interestingly related to femininity in general and in particular. Another very big area of symbolic meaning is also the atmosphere that is created when raindrops fall on these big leaves, because that creates a sort of poetic, slightly melancholic mood that puts the potential author or calligrapher or painter in the right set of mind to start with his own or her own writing or painting. So just to create this cultured mood. Another important subject, more closely related to Chan or Zen Buddhist ideas of the transiency of life, are the torn leaves of the banana plant when it's really windy and stormy and heavy rain, and the big leaves are torn. And they, plus the hollowness of the plant, these two ideas are taken together in Chan Buddhist philosophy for the transiency of life. Then very obviously and very practically, the big leaves, it's cool in their shade in summer. Another idea that comes from poems from the Sung dynasty related to Confucian ideas is the way the banana plant grows. You know, it has a little stub like that, and then the leaves start opening and more come from the center, and from the center they open out. That's understood. And this unfurling of the core leaf, a Confucian writer of the Sung dynasty, he likened that to the Confucian moral development of a young person through studying and learning to become a proper Confucian, gentleman. Yes. So, and the last topic that we can find in these poems is, of course, the hollowness of the plant stem. I wrote it in inverted commas because it's not a tree. So it's hollow, and this again relates to Buddhist notions, in particular in the Vimalakirti Nirdesa Sutra. You might know this not so long sutra where this Brahman, Vimalakirti, he pretends to be ill. and the Buddha can see him, and he sends his bodhisattva to pay him a visit because the poor Vimalakirti is sick. And he visits him in his small hut, and the two engage in a interreligious philosophical debate. And at one point, a lot of miracles happen while they're sitting in that hut. Suddenly, this hut is really big, and there are a lot of people attending and listening. Anyway, the Bodhisattva asks Vimalakirti, what is human life like, the essence of human life? And then Vimalakirti answers with a lot of simile. And one of them is, human life is like a banana plant. It is hollow in the core. So if you hear this term, it's very closely linked to this literal quote from this Buddhist sutra. So far the textual developments. Now we more and more circle into what is really interesting for us here, and that is the paintings and the artworks associated with the motif of the banana plant. And of course, one of the earliest extant catalogues of Chinese painting, an imperial catalogue, the famous Xuanhe Huapu, the painting record of the Xuanhe era, with a preface dated 1120, so we can put a date on it. Would you like to move a little bit further so you can see things better and not just look at my jacket? Sorry for sitting in the way. So this catalogue, perhaps you've already talked
Not
in
yet.
some classes,
Not
but
yet.
you will. It's very important. In the chapters 15, 16, and 17, there are 7 paintings. This is not a lot, but at least we've got some, which mention the word banana, jiao or ba jiao, in the title. And because of the way this catalogue, the Xuanhe Huapu, is organized, it only gives you the title of a painting, the name of the painter, some summary information on the painter, but not a detailed description of the painting. So if the painting is lost nowadays, it's impossible for us really to reconstruct what such a painting may have looked like. All we have to go with is the titles. There may have been other paintings in that catalogue that included banana plants, but if it did not appear in the title, we'll never know. The paintings are gone forever. So, but at least according to the text and the titles, we could identify 4 distinct court painters. One is Bian Luan, and the other 3 are the famous Huang family, served as court painters in the late 5 dynasties and early Song dynasty, Huang Quan, Huang Jubao, and Huang Jucai. So we've got 4 names, and from the titles, they are not just Ba Jiao or Hua or something like that, but they are more complex and slightly more descriptive. We can already identify 3 sort of subgenres somehow related to the banana plant. You see, it's getting a bit fuza. So the first is, you find in the title the banana plant verbally put together with certain types of birds, namely the peacock, the crane, the magpie. All 3 of them are highly charged with symbolical meaning. They are not just any bird in the garden, especially like crane, very important bird symbolism for the crane. You also find the banana plant paired with a rock that might remind you of the first image of Xu Wei I showed. Perhaps you could identify that big inkwash rock with the torn banana plants behind it. So you already, through this information, can start piecing together some sort of attempt at interpreting Xu Wei's painting. But we still have to dig a little bit deeper and collect the pieces before we can venture to make a final pronouncement. Too early for that. And the last type of images related through their title with the banana plant is, quite surprisingly, a winter scene, a figural scene, a historical scene called Yun-an Sleeps Through the Snow. I'll come to that in a little while. So, now we'll try to look at the real thing. We've looked at texts and filtered out whatever is related to the banana plant. Now let's try to find reliable and hopefully datable images in which we can clearly identify the banana plant. So the first thing perhaps you might turn to for the early 6th century, because there is hardly any paintings on paper or silk, genuine works left nowadays. But what we do have are incised stone slabs, like this famous Nelson Atkins sarcophagus, and on one of the side slabs, in this scene down here, I try to enlarge it a bit for you above. Here in the background, can you see?
Yeah.
And it's down here.
Yeah.
It's just in the background, but as to its shape, I think it's fairly clear that this is meant to be a banana plant. If you can offer an alternative, I'd be grateful. And the whole scenario around this sarcophagus are all Confucian scenes of filial piety. So, and the particular scene here with the banana plant in the background is related to the story of a certain Caishun. So, but now we do encounter a problem because of those nasty researchers who always torpedo our wonderful ideas and hopes. So fairly recently, in 2012, Roger Covey came along and he published a very substantial article that reads like a detective story, and I highly recommend it, and make up your own mind what you think of it. I mean, so far everybody studying Chinese painting pretty much started more or less with the Nelson sarcophagus, because that is, so far, was datable to around 525. So, but what Covey, in his essay, what was it called? Canon Formation and the Development of Western Chinese Art History. And this is an article in a bigger volume. The whole of it is really fascinating read. I can highly recommend it. Published by Piersnick and Stoiber, Original Intentions, Essays on Production, Reproduction, and Interpretation in the Arts of China. So he takes great pain and has fairly strong arguments that I'm sort of 50-50 inclined to agree with, that in short, he exposed this Nelson Atkins sarcophagus as a fake that was made in the early 20th century, because it was at that time that a lot of Western people came to China and they were hungry for buying antiques for our museums. And so there was a huge market that meant big money. So it was worth it going to the trouble of faking something like this big sarcophagus. So now this piece of evidence is gone, and we have to look for something else that is early and datable and reliable. Of course, Dunhuang is a place to turn to. I have not included that in my talk here, but that has yielded good, helpful results. But, well, archaeology is advancing fast and offering very interesting and stimulating results. There was a tomb excavated in Tianshui, which is datable to the 6th or 7th century, so that's not too late. And the the bed on which the sarcophagus, the coffin is placed, is made of stone with, again, incised pictures. And they're around here. There are 5 back panels here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And the way this is positioned in the tomb, these 5 are facing south. As you perhaps know from ancient tomb constructions in China, the directional orientation is very important and meaningful. So, of course, you're already here. South, banana plant, there might be something there, and there is. So, and the 3 remaining panels of the sun, of course, facing east, that's where it rises, and with the moon facing west. And one of the back panels, I'll show you a close-up, but I didn't have this published magazine available at hand, so, and the internet images are very poor. We're talking about this panel. I think the best I could offer you is this sketch, rather than a grisly image. So in this back scene here, here in the back.
Voilà.
And you can already distinguish this central leaf, how it unfurls, something we know from later painting that is quite distinctive for the depiction of the banana plant. So what I'm trying to show here is that the context is funerary context. It is a complex scene, but it's definitely related, directionally related to the south. And that in funerary rites is an important aspect. So that's one thing we have to bear in mind, and of course those people who made those pictures and positioned those pictures in this particular tomb had certain ideas behind it. They were clearly told what to do. They couldn't randomly just put a banana plant there because they thought, oh, it's aesthetically pleasing, it's beautiful. They were not free to do that. There was a fixed set of rules that was meaningful. And that is our job, to find out that meaning, to better understand this kind of images. So, and another very interesting tomb where the wall paintings have been wonderfully preserved is the Baoshan number 2 in Chifeng city in Inner Mongolia. There again, on the southern wall. Now this is no surprise to us any longer. This is a dated tomb. It's dated by inscription. So we know definitely it's not an interpretation of archaeologists or art historians. We have it in the inscription, the year, Liao Dynasty 923. So that's secure dating. And this tomb was archaeologically excavated, so it's not that somebody produced fake wall paintings or fake inscriptions. That is, I think, pretty sound and reliable material to work with. And here, I mean, a beautiful, very strong specimen of a banana plant with a central leaf unfurling. And here, and bamboo in close vicinity, and an unidentified tree. And here is the person who has, this young man had just passed away, and he's now just entering the netherworld. If you want to read the whole excavation report, it's published in the very important archaeological journal, Wenwu. It even has a few colored illustrations in this magazine. Highly recommendable. Wenwu, 1998, 1 pages 73 to 94. So let's try and find some more early examples of ideas and motifs that more and more, how the banana plant infused Chinese culture at large. One of them is a famous but very likely anecdotal story about the monk calligrapher Huaisu. who lived in the late 8th century. Here on the screen you see a fairly contemporary painting, contemporary with us, that is, well, vintage people like us, yeah. By Li Keran, Huaisu writing on a banana leaf. So, and perhaps you'll see here emerald sky, today's talk, Under the Emerald Sky. Now I will give you the solution of why the title of this talk, but perhaps you've already mentioned this in your calligraphy class. It is said when Huaisu was a young monk, he was quite poor, but he loved calligraphy, but he was too poor to buy paper. So he just resorted to writing calligraphy on a banana plant to practice. I've actually tried that on a live, freshly cut banana leaf, but the surface of the banana leaf is water repellent, so the ink doesn't stay on. So you might think, well, what's the point then? The point is exactly that you practice and practice, and you have an incessant amount of supply of banana leaves, and when it rains, the whole ink is washed off and you can start afresh. So you practice and practice and practice, and in the end, you might turn out to be a great calligrapher through hard work and a lot of practice. That's the idea behind it. And so there are two pseudonyms or nicknames for Huaisu. One, his little, what do you call that, the room in the monastery where he lived was called Lü Qian, emerald or green sky, because of his practicing calligraphy on a banana leaf, or planted paper, 中指, because he is said to have been so much in want of writing material that he actually planted hundreds of banana plants in the temple ground for calligraphy practice. So, and that idea, although of course, I mean, I think it's just a very nice anecdote, but what it should illustrate is how important practice, practice, practice is to become a good calligrapher. But this idea was still alive and infused images in the 20th century of this famous painter like Li Keran, of the monk Huaisu writing on a banana leaf. And possibly quite early, that is perhaps also debatable, still looking into the question of what cultural spheres did the banana plant enter, and in what context do we have to look at it, is quite a long hand scroll in the Shanghai Museum, which has, for the moment, the title Lofty Recluses. This is just one detail from that painting, and in the background of this gentleman, next to that rock, that's again a very interesting combination, rock and banana plant, that we should bear in mind for iconographic meaning. I mean, you're all aware of the combination of bamboo and rock. That has been standard since at least the Song. But banana plant and rock is quite early in this painting. So, for the moment called Lofty Recluses, but we know that this title was added in the hand, in the calligraphy of the Song Emperor Huizong. Here at the beginning of the scroll, he gave that painting that title. Before, it did not have a title. So nobody until Huizong came along and decided this is what this painting is about, knew what this painting is about. It was just some gentleman sitting on a nice carpet outdoors, but doing what? Who are they? How can we identify them? So Huizong just decided that by providing this title. But you know, scholars are not lazy people. A Chinese colleague, I think he's in the Shanghai Museum, came along and analyzed this painting again, and he realized that this scroll is actually incomplete, and that it was cut off at the end, I think. So there are presumably more people at the end of the scroll that nowadays are no longer there. And it has been suggested that the original painting was actually a depiction of the motif of the so-called 7 sages of the bamboo grove. So a very specific group of people, historical people, with names to them. And of course you're all familiar with the Zhulin Qixian from this famous tiles, these bricks, where the names of these 7 gentlemen are inscribed in cartouches next to them, and the scholar who reanalyzed this painting said that it's very likely that the gentleman who is positioned closest to the banana plant is actually one of the 7 sages of the bamboo grove named Wang Rong. So. Other contexts where we find that we're moving on in time now is a small little album leaf now in the National Palace Museum in Taipei, attributed to Zhou Wenju, latter half of the 10th century, a simple outdoor garden palace scene of palace ladies making music, and in the background you see a banana plant and miniature rocks. And the ladies doing not just nothing, I mean they're playing music. So it's a cultural activity that is related to this setting. And behind them you find a nice painted lacquer screen, so this is all very high culture. This is not just playing the flute and sitting on the back of an ox or something.
Yeah.
So this is high culture. Yeah, so just the title. Yeah. And another fairly early scene, a century later, attributed to Zhao Boju. So far it has one title is the Han Palace. It is now mounted as a hanging scroll, but as you can see, originally it was a fan-shaped album leaf. It's a bit hard to see, and I couldn't find any really good high-resolution images, but perhaps you can see, I mean, there's a procession of ladies here, all clad in white. There are more guests arriving in carriages out here. A palace kind of building, open. It must be some ceremony. In the back there are more people going through this opening in the rock here, and they're all going up or coming down from this pavilion at the top. And here in the background there is almost a banana plant forest, not just one. And I don't think that this is a coincidence. It helps us perhaps to identify what this image is actually about. And again, originally this painting had no title, and until the 16th century it was not clear what this painting is about. Here is a close-up, sorry, this is a bit blurred, of these clearly identifiable banana plants, and those ladies with musical instruments, carrying certain offerings. It's quite an intriguing scene. Fans, auspicious corals, interesting details, and carrying musical instruments. Here, for example, a tambourine. So, in the late 17th century, the famous painter, calligrapher, Dong Qichang, an art historian, of course, he attributed this painting to this Song Dynasty painter Zhao Boju. He did not give it a title. He did not solve the riddle, what is this painting really about, but he just said that this is a fine painting by Zhao Boju. That's another name for Zhao Boju, and he signed it. So through his authority as a great painter and as art historian, not through a signature or a seal by Zhao Boju, but because Dong Qichang said this is a Zhao Boju, so this anonymous painting became a Zhao Boju. This is very often how it works. If really important art historians proclaim this is a real, I don't know, Dong Qichang or something, then suddenly a previously anonymous work of art becomes something famous.
Until today.
Until today. Yes, I mean, this is an ongoing, fascinating debate. And Emperor Qianlong couldn't let this rest. This was a puzzle. He had this painting in his collection, including the calligraphy by Dong Qichang on the facing page. So he had it up one day and examined it, and being a very learned and knowledgeable man, he decided to give this mysterious picture a topic. And he said that this is related to the sacrifice performed by the Han Emperor Wu Di in his effort to meet the Queen Mother of the West in the search for longevity. So these are the heavenly queen maidens. So here, the meeting on the 7th is. So in a very different, seemingly very different context, apart from palace-related images, are Buddhist images. And as you perhaps know, Luohan, these arhat paintings in Buddhism, they usually come as a set. There is never just a single Luohan. You have either groups in one painting, or you have sets of 12, 24, 18, etc. And very often in nowadays concrete practical museums work in the art market, perhaps your museum might let you buy 2 paintings or 3. And then you wonder, where's the rest of the set? And you look around in the world, you perhaps find another one. Eventually you are perhaps lucky to put together a more or less complete set. And from known complete sets, we know that specific luohans are often associated with specific plants. But unfortunately, this one-to-one thing doesn't work 100%. It's perhaps in 85% of the cases that a specific luohan, let's say the luohan number 12, is associated with a banana plant. But you might still find 10% where the same luohan is associated with a different plant. So unfortunately, this doesn't work, which would have been very helpful for people working in a museum or in auction houses to reconstruct sets of luohan paintings. Here, at least, we have a very, very nice, beautiful example by Liu Songnian from the Song dynasty of a luohan, now in the National Palace Museum in Taipei. It's beautifully painted. I can't resist to show you that detail. Just look at his halo. You can see through the haze of his halo and look at the structure of the wooden screen behind. That's how detailed and finely done this is. So I've explained about this problem of associating specific luohan with specific plants, but very often you find at least one of them associated in the background with a banana plant. So in Buddhist ideas or in sets of luohan paintings, the banana plant also seems to play a significant role. Difficult, but we're still sort of in a similar period, moving on, maybe 50 years. A painting by Liu Guandao, Whiling Away the Summer, a hand scroll, also in the Nelson Atkins Museum in Kansas, the same where this unfortunate sarcophagus is placed. Here you see a gentleman in the summer, as the title implies, lazing, well, not just lazing around on a summer day on a couch, but I mean he's surrounded by cultured objects. There is a musical instrument behind him. He is sort of idly holding a small scroll in his left hand, a fly whisk. In the background, you see a painted screen, which repeats the motif of the painted screen.
In the painted screen.
In the painted screen, sitting on a kind of bed, and again some books stacked to his side, and to the left of the painted scholar, you see a table laid out with some objects from his collection. They might be some bronzes or ceramic vessels, whatever, and two female attendants, one of them carrying a big fan, which is also painted. And this scroll is followed by a very long Taoist text. I can't do this now, would be a separate talk, just to show you how many different ideas are not loosely, but are concretely associated with the banana plant as a motif. Like this, very Taoist in the sense of he's musing, he's thinking, he's surrounded by all his cultural paraphernalia about, is that real what he's doing, what he's thinking, his actions? Does that translate into reality? Does reality have an impact on his doings? So we have to put this Taoist text that follows this image, of course, in context with this image. Just a detail of those lady attendants and of the gentleman at leisure, but you see he's sort of frowning his brow a little bit. He's really thinking and concentrating. He's not just whiling away a summer's day. So now a very central idea, especially in Sung Dynasty aesthetic discourse, is the idea of the banana in the snow, which, as I said at the beginning, is an oddity. The banana plant is a plant of the south that does not survive in the north and dies in the snow, definitely. The famous philosopher Shenghua, he wrote a text, the Mengqi Bitan, that perhaps sections of which you might read in your courses. We can read the following quote in translation. In my collection, there is a painting by Wang Wei of Yuan An lying in bed after the snowfall at Luoyang that has a banana palm growing in the snow. So for Shenghua, this was a strange thing to do. There should be no banana plant in a snow scene. No. But in his family collection, I mean, he owned a painting which looked like that, according to his own words. So we have at least the textual evidence. Unfortunately, this Wang Wei painting no longer exists. But this idea that you find the banana plant in the snow, an object out of place and out of time, started a whole discussion on the freedom of the artist, basically. It's only artists who can create such things that in the so-called reality do not exist. An anomality like a banana plant in the snow. It shouldn't be there. But an artist like Wang Wei has the freedom to paint one as he likes. And this is later on in the Ming Dynasty. I'll try to shorten this a bit now. In the Ming Dynasty, this whole Sung Dynasty discussion was picked up again, and from the Ming Dynasty we have quite a number of paintings, including by very famous painters, that are done in a very free, xie kind of manner. So they're not gongbi, very detailed, trying to depict a banana plant, but they just, in their calligraphy, in the inscription on the painting, said, I painted this painting in the spirit of Wang Wei. What they are referring to is the freedom of the artist, and it's usually very untrammeled, wet brushwork where you can almost not identify what is actually in the painting. It's just splash of ink and color, very free. But in the inscription, the artist himself declares, I painted this in the spirit of Wang Wei. And what he wants to say is, look, you know, I take this as a sort of fig leaf behind which I can hide, not a banana leaf, but a fig leaf behind which I can hide, and play around with ink and color as I please. So we leave out this whole moralistic Yuan-an story. You could read that perhaps in the meantime. This discussion continues for quite a while. Yeah, another very important text on painting, Guoruoxu, the Tuhua Jianwenzhi, also mentions a set of 8 hanging scrolls, also on the topic of Yuan-an lying in the snow. I'll skip this because this has more moral confusion associations. But what is important if we try to verify the facts, I mean, this Yuan-an was a person who really existed, a historical figure. He lived in the Han Dynasty, and this story that one day there was a great snowfall at Luoyang, and Yuan-an did not want to trouble his servants to shovel the snow and to send them to the market to fetch the last bit of food and drink that there was. Instead, he was just withdrawing to his study, and he lay there on the bed and waited until everything was over. I mean, risking his life to starve, but he did not want to trouble the servants or other people. Later, an official came through Luoyang, and he heard of the morally upright, proper conduct of Yuan-an, and he wanted to honor him, that he has done such a good deed, and this is recorded in the Houhanshu 75, in the official Han history. But if you read the biography of Yuan-an, there is no mention of a banana plant in that scene whatsoever, which again is proof that the painter in the Tang Dynasty, Wang Wei, he made this up to sort of illustrate or give more power to the story of Yuan-an sleeping through the snow. An artistic invention. So, and this whole discussion about the freedom of the arts continues, using the banana plant in the snow as a kind of trope or topic which is discussed by people like this Buddhist monk Hui Hong. He wrote referring to poetry, but as you know, very often aesthetic notions of poetry are also transferred to both calligraphy and painting, similar ideas. So he said, poetry is that in which extraordinary viewpoints and exceptional thought are lodged. How could it be constrained by ruler and measurement? Wang Wei painted a banana in the snow. Viewed with a dharma eye, one knows he lodged his inspired feelings in this image. But vulgar people criticize him for not understanding the different season. So I think that's a very strong, clear statement. And below, just as a small illustration to this aesthetic discussion, is another painting of a banana in the snow by Xu Wei. It's now in the Beijing Palace Museum, where he says, Xu Wei, here, I painted this banana in the snow according to Wang Wei. He mentions Wang Wei specifically, and you see it's a very free brushwork. So in practicality, in the real paintings, these Song Dynasty aesthetic ideas translated into real paintings, freestyle paintings. Also, another idea related to the banana plant is that of the so-called elegant gathering in the Western Garden, a gathering which we all now, thanks to our dear colleague Ellen Johnston-Lang, know never happened, but the myth was carried on. It was said in that story that one day a Song Dynasty prince invited the most eminent artists of his time to his garden, and they spend a whole leisurely afternoon pursuing cultural things like doing paintings, writing poetry, calligraphy, playing music, chess, etc. And that became a type of recognizable painting with this general title, The Elegant Gathering in the Western Garden, 西园雅集. And in this type of painting, and one of the members of this purported gathering that never happened in real life is that the calligrapher Mi Fu wrote characters on a rock. So here in the center, you see Mi Fu and his attendant holding the ink slab, beneath or near a banana plant, about to write on the face of the rock. So here's a later copy by Qiu Ying, also now in the National Palace Museum. It's almost identical. Here you have a better color image again. Mi Fu about to write on the rock in the proximity of the banana plant. So, and all of them, I mean, they're writing poetry, calligraphy, they're doing painting, they're playing music, chess, etc. So these are all the highly regarded cultural activities. And the banana plant is now part and parcel of the scene, part of the plant players, like bamboo. So in this, perhaps, I hope you recognize, because it's on the poster, a lovely little fan painting in the National Palace Museum by Shenzhou. Several translations are possible. One of them reads, of the inscription, under the banana, one does not feel the heat of summer. You're already familiar with the notion of heat, summer and south. And now there comes the philosophical twist. Sitting here, my heart fills with thoughts of antiquity. Gu Xin, here. 10,000. So, I mean, more is not possible. I mean, he's really full of the whole of the Chinese culture past. And what is he doing, feeling like that at that moment? As you can see, this little man here, I hold the chin, but I don't need to play. Heaven and earth know my music. So he's in perfect accordance with heaven and earth. He is, so to speak, by being imbued with culture and cultural values. Sitting there, he has found his position as a human being, in this case as a chin player or as a painter, the right position between heaven and earth. He doesn't have to struggle anymore, but he's found his place in life, and he's tranquil. Just another close-up. Here you have the transcription of the Chinese. And actually the painter Shenzhou, of whom you see a self-portrait done when he was quite advanced in age, I mean in those days, 80 was quite a number of years, he not only did a number of paintings that are somehow related to the banana plant, but also wrote poems and even slightly longer texts relating to the banana plant as a subject. One of them is a text he wrote called Listening to the Rain, on the plantain, in 1489. This is just the text. I won't go through that now, but there's a lot of associations that you found already in Tang and Sung poetry. They were the first to pronounce certain ideas related to the banana plant, like the rain, the sound of the raindrops, of the big leaves, etc. Here, sound of the rain. There's even the term jiao yu, banana rain, etc. So it's very densely loaded text, resulting in this listening to the plantain. Actually, it's of course the rain on the plantain leaves. This is signed and attributed to Shenzhou, but in all likelihood it's a later copy. But anyway, it's in his tradition, in his style, and there's an inscription by Shenzhou which again associates various aspects like the banana on the rain or sitting by the window about to write a piece of poetry or a piece of calligraphy and then being inspired by listening to the rain on the banana leaves. And in the background of various other paintings, Shenzhou quite frequently depicted the banana plant, like in this little album leaf now mounted as a hanging scroll. Here in the background, and you see how in a painterly way quite specific ways of depicting the banana plant also are developed, especially in the Ming Dynasty. Before that it was a bit sort of summary and you almost had to guess, well, yes, I think this is a banana plant. But here they've developed, people like Shenzhou, painterly devices of how to paint banana plants with those two lines in the middle and to the sides. That's a specific way of painting. That's a little album leaf by Du Qiong, also Ming Dynasty, now in the Shanghai Museum. And here the title of this particular leaf, Jiaoyuan, the banana garden. The scholar sitting there on a tiger skin with his fly whisk, not doing much else. His servant is approaching him. You see Taihu rocks with the holes and flowering, the red and green symbolism, flowering banana plants. Now, what is this picture about more than just a very pleasant summer picture? It goes a lot deeper. It really carries a message. Read the title again, 10 Views of the Nancun Villa. Here, another close-up. So this Nancun Villa was actually the name of the estate of, where have we got him? Du Qiong's mentor and teacher, the famous Tao Congyi. He was a scholar and he was not happy to work with the Mongolian government. He lived a life as a recluse, and for people working in calligraphy, he is of course also known as the author of the Shu Shi Hui Yao, an important book on the history of calligraphy. Now, when his student Du Qiong did a series of 10 leaves depicting scenes of the residency of his teacher Tao Congyi, and one of them is the section called Jiaoyuan, the banana garden, the whole set of paintings was done after his teacher Tao Congyi had passed away. So this was a memorial painting showing the student's respect towards his teacher and the student's interpretation of what a morally worthy and cultured person his teacher was through those images. So this is not just a scholar idly sitting in the summer in the shade of banana plants, but it is strongly infused with all those highly charged cultural notions relating to the banana plant. So it's a very powerful image. And here's just not randomly, but a number of images by mainly Xu Wei, somehow a Bada Shanren crept in there as well. So he's one of the foremost developers of this motif, banana plant, very often in combination with a rock or banana plant in the snow, or torn banana leaves. And now we're entering the realm of using pictures like the one on the left as a mode of self-expression, how the artist feels at this moment.
To the right?
Very right.
Yeah.
Yeah?
Xu Wei?
Yes,
Yeah.
well, attributed to.
Yeah.
This is a bit of a dubious, obscure painting.
Das ist Stockholm,
Yes, a close-up of that. And you have at the bottom, you have a few twigs outlined bamboo. Up here you have some mais, plum blossoms, and the rock. So that is a classical combination, but what you expect is not a banana plant to be thrown in on top of it. But now, in this picture, the banana plant, which is depicted like the wheels of the arms of a windmill, torn by wind and rain.
Yeah.
That is actually an expression of Xue's feelings himself. He felt like, I mean, he is a cultured gentleman, but he led a very hard life. He was even imprisoned at some point. He's said to have killed his wife and with an axe, and he has tried to self-mutilate himself. And anyway, he led not an easy life. But he loved painting, and I can imagine that mentally he perhaps often had difficult times or troubled moments. And it was perhaps a moment like this where he was quite desperate and wanted to let out his personal feelings at the time that he came up with this painting. So quite a personal statement, how he felt. And another very important and big chapter in my book will, of course, also be the big topic of the banana in the rain. This is a very famous it is a painting in the Nanzenji in Kyoto, which is datable to the second half of the 14th century. And this is in this style called in Japanese shigajiku. That means usually a hanging scroll, and at the bottom you just have a hint of a very small little painting, and above you have a lot of inscriptions and poetry. That's this type of painting. That's the technical term, shigajiku. And here at the bottom, I mean, there's 90% of this scroll is inscriptions. And they are all making reference to the landscape scene below. And I'll show you a close-up in a moment. But here, fairly central in the picture, in this landscape picture, again, in a very prominent place next to this pavilion, is a banana plant. And the background landscape in the Mi style, etc. Lots more could be said about this. But this is I think it's even a national treasure in Japan, this painting. It's a very, very important painting. And the topic is night rain.
On banana.
Yes. So, and that is where it belongs and where it was created. Then in calligraphy too, you find poems related to the banana plant, like this Ming Dynasty, Yaoshou, long scroll in the Princeton Museum. I'll just speed this up a little bit. And you see the same names like Shenzhou, you've just seen his paintings. Earlier you've seen Dong Qichang commenting on this little album leaf with that procession, trying to identify it. So these people talked and interacted. And again, in the background of this scene, by Dujin in the National Palace Museum, title is Enjoying Antiquities. And you can see the host gentleman displaying a lot of objects, antique objects, for his host, who started to examine one of the objects. And there is an inscription by Du Qin on this painting explaining what this painting is about. It is much more than just showing off his art collection and looking at it, but they are discussing it in a very specific way. In the inscription it says, enjoying antiquities was common before, being studied for their high aspiration. By esteeming shapes and providing names, ritual and music are to be found within them. A day without ritual and music, and humanity would fall from grace. To perform and uphold them, that is what I have So Dujin inscribed together with painting of enjoying antiquities requested by a certain unknown Jian Mian, I have here sought resemblance beyond form. Giving voice to my intention, may the viewer examine this. So this is dealing with traditional art objects, engaging by deciding their forms and shapes, being knowledgeable about them, identifying them, like this is a Zhou dynasty Ding vessel, and giving them names, like doing archaeological or art historical work, trying to reconstruct antiquity and giving things the right names, not just randomly ramble on about the objects of the past and interpreting them at your whim and will, but based on real facts and engaging in scholarly analysis and discussion with your peers who come and look at your art collection. That's the approach that Dujin advocates in this seemingly simple painting. So we'll skip that for reasons of time, but the Ming dynasty is really the crucial period where all those different cultural associations with the banana plant were picked up by a number of extremely well-known artists and scholars, including Wen Zhengming. It's perhaps a bit hard to see here, a banana plant in a scholarly scene here, close-up. Here's a calligraphy also by Wen Zhengming. You perhaps know his life story, so I'll just skip that. But one day, after 10 times sitting the imperial exams and 10 times failing them, nevertheless, he became a great painter and calligrapher. And in 1525, he had the privilege that he was invited to stroll through the imperial gardens. And upon his return, he wrote a calligraphic poem on the different sections in the imperial garden, which also, of course, reflected the high social status that he had received through the honor of visiting this garden. And one section of that garden, of course, is the banana garden, by now a well-established part and parcel thing, even of an imperial man-made constructed garden. And in this inscription you find notions to calligraphy here. Lanting, the place of Wang Xizhi and Wang Xianzhi is mentioned, etc. So culturally this is very compact and rich. So we'll just skip a few of these. And if we read later, like early Qing dynasty texts like this one, well, Li Yu is perhaps more well known for another text, but he has written a very interesting book, the Xiangqing Ouji. This is about, well, social and cultural everyday life. And there is a chapter on what plants a scholar should cultivate in his or her garden, and the ideas related to it. So, and in there it says the banana plant has a resonance in the cultured person and prevents vulgarity, like bamboo. Now here we are finally. The banana plant has, so to speak, climbed the social and cultural ladder until in the 17th century it has reached the same level of the bamboo. So I'll skip this, we are out of time now. Here you find this term, Lu Meng, the deer dream. I mean, nothing in the painting, it's just a few banana leaves, would suggest what profound philosophical ideas lie behind this seemingly very simple little sketch. Yeah, so we'll leave that, but by now it's become a standard pass and parcel, copying the elegant gathering in the Western Garden. Later in the Ming and early Qing dynasty, people who were not scholars but merchants, so socially they had a lower rank in society. But to come up in society they had to do cultural things like They had to learn to write calligraphy, to compose poetry, to form poetry associations like those rich salt merchants, the Ma brothers in Yangzhou. Socially, culturally, they were nobody. So they had to engage calligraphy teachers, poetry teachers, and they had to buy a lot of books, establish a library, and found a poetry association. Only after they've done all that were they accepted by the cultural elite. And one such gathering actually really happened in Yangzhou, in their garden, where they got together with the scholarly elite, and that also includes, naturally, a banana plant in the background. Bada Shanren, this late Ming prince who had to fear for his life when the Qing dynasty was established, also used the banana plant without much of a comment as personal statement of how he felt at a certain moment in his life. And here too we find this by now perfectly naturally accepted combination of banana plant paired with the bamboo and a rock. So now this is a fully established and accepted cultural self-statement of the educated Wenren. Yeah. All of this is details Bada Shanren. And of course, if somebody had their portrait painted, they very carefully chose the setting. They told the painter how to paint them, naturally. And they always wanted to be affiliated or associated with something that is important for them, to show them in the right light, so to speak. And we have examples of these three gentlemen who deliberately had their portrait painted near lush banana plants. This is the calligrapher and seal carver Wu Changshuo, the painter Jiang Shinong, and the painter Zhang Xiong. Just a close-up. And Wu Changshuo actually incorporated banana leaves a lot in his painting, including New Year's paintings or paintings with auspicious meanings and pairing them with other auspicious types of fruit and plants. And in that sense, I wanted to end with something auspicious for the now new Chinese New Year, a very happy, auspicious and lucky and happy and healthy Chinese Year of the Dog to you all. Thank you.